background, or is it just based on your feeling when you're playing these games? Like, how did you kind of come to that conclusion that it was a good or bad game?
I guess, yeah, they just didn't work for my roommate and I.
Okay.
They might have been fine games for other folks, but no, at that time I had no concept of what a good or bad board game is, and
Yeah.
I think even still today, people might say I don't have good taste. So yeah.
So how many years ago was that? Like, when was that? When you're a starving grad student trying to entertain
I
yourself by making
believe
board
that I
games?
first started playing board games in around 2013 or 14,
Okay.
something like that.
So you've been in
So,
the industry for about 10 years. And then when did you kind of then transition into your first kind of attempt to make something of your own?
right. So I actually went and did a game jam with sort of experimental
Yeah.
technology similar to what the blinks are.
Hmm.
Uh, and I ended up doing well in that game jam, but really it was just like, do you understand tech at that point? Like, it wasn't that I knew, like, I came up with like a great game design. It's just, I sort of knew how to make something for this new type of tech. And so I did well on that game jam. They ended up offering me a contract to make games for them. And so I was like, okay, let's go ahead and do that. That'd be a fun thing to do on the side
Yeah.
while in grad school. And then uh, I ended up going to New York City Playtest Group. And originally I was always just bringing them sort of like app style games. So I was looking at like making word game apps, things like that. So like, yeah, once I got into like that digital space, I started thinking about digital games in general, and I was always bringing these paper prototypes, right? But everybody
Mm.
at NYC Playtest were board game designers, and so I was like, okay, well, why don't I give this a shot? And so again, I was starting to play them as a hobby, and all the designers I knew happened to be board game designers. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try a board game instead of just digital only.
Yeah. So you're saying that you would actually make like even cutouts and so forth, even for the digital to kind of map out how you're going to do
Oh,
the digital game?
100%.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
I used to practice with cards that we would make.
So you're pretty much making a board game first, and then you digitize it.
Right. Yeah, but a board game that nobody would want to actually buy or play.
Yeah, sure. It'd be more simplistic and so forth, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, simplistic, but just, yeah, there's a lot of affordances of mobile devices, like you mentioned with Carcassonne. Like, it can hint you on things, it can sort of keep track of scores
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And it can just be smarter about like what cards, right, it gives you. Things like all those types of things in a board game is much harder to do. And so I had to sort of fake those things like during these playtests.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, none of those will be board games, I don't think, at any point. But yeah, we definitely started with paper prototypes.
Was there a game that you created that you didn't take any for? Like the first game you created, was that the one that you went and published, or was like the first board game? What was the first thing you created?
Let's see here. Pipeline was certainly one of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
I think I created I did look and see if there were ways I could make versions of the apps that I was making into something that would be more board game like,
Makes
but
sense.
they were all word games.
Mm.
And I was told, you know, rightfully so or not, that word games were harder to pitch. And then like I had this math like team based game, and so it mixed math and team play, and everybody's like, that's just simply not pitchable. So I was like, all right, what are people, potentially buying in the hobby market?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's sort of where Pipeline came along. At the time, I was playing a lot of like Vital Lacerda style games. I was into the business simulator, the economic simulator style games, and I was like, I suspect I could make something like this, so let's give it a shot.
That's crazy. And then how did you pitch that first game? So Pipeline, so if that was the first one you made, was it Pipeline?
Pipeline, yeah, was the first published one.
And who'd you publish that with?
Capstone Games.
Capstone Games. So then how did you approach them with that? Like where did that take place?
So I went to, I believe it was It was either Origins or Gen Con, and basically it must have been Gen Con. So it was Gen Con. I went up to the booth and I was like, I think I have a game that you might like, and he's like, I'm not interested, and I was like, okay. And so like I walked away, and
Yeah.
then his wife, who was also at the booth at with him, I guess felt bad for me, and so she came up and she's like, he's just super busy right now. Like Gen Con's a big selling convention.
Yeah.
Why don't you send an email to us at this address, and we'll take a closer look at your pitch. So that night, when I got back to the hotel, I sent him an email with the thing, and he said not interested. And I was like, oh, okay. So I got rejected twice. And then on the last day of the convention, Joe Wiggins, who happened to be a volunteer for, he now works for Board Game Tables, but at the time he was a volunteer for Capstone, and he was like, I have a little bit of free time, and so on the very last day, pretty much, right towards the end of the convention, he play tested it or demoed it, and he sort of got super hyped on it, and then he essentially convinced Clay to pick it up. So
Wow.
a little bit of nagging on me, a little like on my part, and a lot of getting rejected, but then in the end, it worked out. So a little bit of a roller coaster Gen Con, but I think that's one thing as new designers you have to sort of realize is that you are going to get rejected a lot. It's something that you need to get used to. That is the norm. Even as you start getting more games published, you still get your stuff rejected quite regularly.
Yeah. But I guess the persistence in this case is what separates the wheat from the chase, so to speak, I guess, right?
That, and I mean, I just got lucky that Joe Wiggins, the volunteer, happened to have time there at the end, right? If he was just like, no, I'm a little, I'm tired. I've worked this whole convention. I don't feel like doing this. Like, it would have never happened, I don't think.
But I think in that case, so you still so for those out there that maybe have game ideas of themselves and they're thinking, gosh, I'd love to pitch to a publisher. You have to realize that these conventions, they're getting inundated with not only people who are interested in buying games, but people randomly walking up saying, hey, I have a game idea. Right. I was at a small convention in Toronto, and I had that at least a dozen people come up to you saying, hey, I got a game idea. Are you guys interested in, talking as a publisher? So, that first no, a lot of people will probably just take and walk away, but you actually went back to these guys 3 times, right? Three times. The third time was kind of was a lucky charm, I guess, in this case.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm used to rejection and failure. I don't know. It doesn't bother me that much. So just keep putting it in front of people. All it takes is one person to say yes. And you forget all the rejections quickly after, right? So
and I guess if you don't take it personally, right? I think that's the key is to realize this is part of the game, so to speak, right? It's part of the process. And it's like any artist, even if you think of music, I'm sure they have to pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch until finally, sometimes, as we said, opportunity meets up with preparedness. That's luck, right? And they get lucky, right? And then something magical can happen. In this case, you get a publisher to sign you. Once you have one, then I'm sure that helps you from a credibility standpoint. When you're talking to others, you can say, well, another publisher's already taken a chance on you, so it had success. Maybe we should give this guy a shot as well, I would think, right?
Certainly helps. It doesn't mean that so what it really does is it gets you in the door more often. So you get more pitch meetings. But it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get your game signed. But you will get more meetings as people start to see that you have a track record.
How'd you connect with Bitewing?
Bitewing contacted me, so that was a different experience for me.
Yeah.
So they saw, maybe I posted something on a social media, or maybe I did a stream or something, and they're like, who has that hiking game that you talked about or whatever? And I was like, nobody yet. And they're like, okay, we want to look at it. So that was nice. I didn't have to find them this time.
And I think that maybe shows the importance of also having your own social presence, right? And I think that often designers who are, looking to connect with publishers is they're hoping that the publishers will kind of take the ball and run with it, and they just kind of create the game. But again, you're going to increase your odds if you have your own following as well, right? A publisher's not just looking at the game, but if this is a designer that has a following and there's people that are already passionate about that designer's games and they know there's an audience that's going to come along with them, there's going to be an increased urgency to work with that particular designer.
Right. Yeah. I actually was very reticent to get on social media, so I didn't really want to be in that space.
Yeah.
But I had a content creator friend who just would not stop nagging me until I did it. She was just like, look, you are really hurting your chances of building a career or building a reputation in this space if you don't do it. You just simply need to. And she bugged me for the longest time. And then I was like, okay, fine, I'll just do this so that she'll stop bugging me. But no, it's 100% the case. You need to, almost everybody without exception needs to start, building their own brand around themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. The number of times I talk to publishers and like when we're off air, they're like, the social media part, I just absolutely hate it. And it's like, but you got to do it, right? Because if you don't, guess what? You're not going to be successful as a publisher without it. So it's kind of the necessary evil. It's all those things you just got to skills. You just got to start trying to figure out. And, the best way to start is to start. Right.
Right. And you'll meet people who are very kind to you and they encourage you and stuff like that. So there's upsides too, but yeah, I definitely understand the initial resistance. I was definitely part of that for sure.
So talk to me about Trailblazers. So Trailblazers, I'm going to put this in Canadian dollars because it's the only way I can see it, is at $100 and almost $37,000 on a $19,500 target, which is huge. 1,715 backers. Congratulations on that. Obviously testament to the game. Can you explain to people who are watching or maybe just listening even, so I'll use descriptive words, what is Trailblazers all about? How does this game work?
Okay, so Trailblazers is a lightweight tile laying game. It has simultaneous drafting, similar to like say a Sushi Go or a Seven Wonders, and because of that, it doesn't really matter how many players you play with. You can play all the way up to that 8-player count, and the game is still going to last around 30 minutes total. So it's a quick teach. The play time, even with large player counts, is still going to be only 30 minutes. And then on top of that, I worked really hard on this game to make sure that I was taking care of the solo gamers. And so there's actually 3 different solo modes that I worked in building into this game. So I'm really happy about that solo part for sure.
Oh, sweet. So then how do you play the game? So for those who haven't maybe played Pipeline, which there's some inspiration here from that game, you have basically, I guess, camps that each player sets on the table. And then what do they do from there?
Right. So you have 3 different camps, one of each of 3 colors. And then you're going to have these little domino cards. So domino shaped cards. And on those domino shaped cards, there's going to be different trails. And the trails are going to be of the 3 different types. And similar to like Carcassonne, which we mentioned earlier, like the Carcassonne roads, you're going to sort of be placing these cards adjacent to each other, but actually you can stack these on top of each other as well. So you can build over things. So if you make a mistake or something like that, you can fix it. So it's a little bit forgiving in that sort of way. But yeah, you're building these routes, and then they go away from the camps, and then they need to come back to the camp. So all the hikers, bikers, and kayakers want to go in a loop. Right? They don't want to have to go out to the end and then have to walk back the same route that they were on. So you're trying to make these various different routes on these 3 different campsites, coming out of these 3 different campsites.
And based on the length, I guess, of the route is how you can score more points, essentially. Is that correct?
Right. There's some in-game cards and some end-game scoring cards, and then you'll get additional points for how long your routes are as well.
Super awesome. One of the things that attracted me to this was, the cleverness of, keeping in mind that this has kind of got a hiking kind of theme to it, and it's a perfect game to take, on a camping trip, or taking for a picnic, or taking outdoors with you. The cards themselves, I believe, are acrylic, so that they don't moisture's not going to wreck the cards, the tiles, I guess. And then there's like this little a pack that with the carbine kind of hooks onto your backpack that holds the entire game, which is really, really cool. How much of this was kind of mapped out in your original game design before you kind of started working with Bitewing?
Okay, so Bitewing and I have worked together quite heavily. So sometimes with publishers, it's mostly a hand it off and they do everything. With Bitewing, that wasn't the case. Bitewing is a very small publisher.
Yeah.
They've only done one Kickstarter before, and that Kickstarter was for like 29,000 US. So yeah, very small publisher. So this was their second game. And one of the reasons that I wanted to work with them is that they gave me a good amount of control over the overall product. So the travel pouch, that was something that I had already thought about wanting into, like, as part of the overall product of this game. He ended up picking out the exact clamshell. Like, the details definitely was done by Bitewing, but like this idea of having a travel pouch that was colorful and sort of felt like an outdoorsy pouch, like, yeah, I came in with all those types of things. Making it waterproof was 100% his idea. So he sort of took that idea of that I had and was like, and ran with it.
Smart,
and I mean, he made it better than my original vision.
How do these little I'm showing again for people who are watching live on screen, how do these animals come into play? There's like these little meeples of like different animals. How do they come into play with this game?
Right. So there's 2 expansions in the game, and they both use the animals. So if you're just using just the animal expansion, what you'll be doing is placing these animals along the routes. Each or some subset of cards have little animals depicted on them. And whenever you see one of those, or whenever you play one of those, you have the option to put an animal on top, and you'll get points for those animals. But the downside of that is any card that you put an animal on top, you may no longer fix by putting a new card on top. So it constrains you, but then you get points. So it's a trade-off there between constraints and points. And yeah, it sort of makes you have to push your luck a little bit more. And then the little people and the campfires, those are used in the second expansion. And in that expansion, what you're doing is you're actually building the trails as the little people walk along them. So each turn, you'll move 2 of your people 3 steps, and the animals come into play there because the people will stop and take a photograph of the animals as they go by. So it slows them down. So that's sort of I don't know how to explain this, but basically you're just trying to keep the trail long enough that the person doesn't run off the trail.
And what happens when they run off the trail?
They take a camp early, and then basically you miss out on scoring points. So they'll camp early. There's nothing disastrous that happens, but yeah, you miss out on points. We try to be relatively forgiving in everything in this game. There's no negative points, and there's no instant loss like in Curious Cargo. So a lot of my games tend to be quite punishing. I tried to not do that with this one.
Yeah. What are some of the game styles that really interest you, that you want to really sink your teeth in as you kind of move forward?
To be honest, I'm pretty happy working in most genres. I think like narrative or narrative style games, probably not an area where you'll see me. I stick to things that are mathematical systems. So but any place that I can do that, like it doesn't matter what type of math for me, it's all pretty interesting. So Yeah, I'm hoping I don't pigeonhole myself. I know I've put out now 3 pipe route laying games.
Yeah.
I hope everybody doesn't just, consider me the pipe guy.
He's the plumber.
Yeah,
He's the plumber of the board game industry.
yeah.
Do you use any kind of like third party software? Like, so these are all mathematically based. Like, are you using any kind of other tools to help you with that to, ensure balance and so forth?
Not so much with the board games. With the app style games, I do run simulations.
Mm.
But with the board games, not so much. It's usually just based off of a relatively simple mathematical model. Like mostly just do that on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing that advanced with what these are.
And as a designer, I would say that, I think it's super cool that, you are helping, your publishers with, kind of the media tour, for lack of a better word, right? And you don't always see that. Sometimes you see designers that just kind of want to hand it off and then kind of go on and work on something else. How important do you think it is to have that kind of relationship where you're actively involved in promoting in the game and so forth?
Well, arguably, if I made super good games, I wouldn't have to do this. So, yeah, I mean, it's very important, I think. Yeah, I'm not usually one for attention.
Yeah.
Typically, I'm not, like at conventions, I like to flip my badge around the other way, so, and just like sort of watch at the booth. But no, it's super important. It's just like social media. Like we have to work on building a brand around our products if we want them to do well. And like it or not, the board game industry, like most of these sort of creative industries, is sort of rich get richer.
Yeah.
So, you need to be in the top, 1% of games in a year to really have a chance to go into that sort of evergreen position. And for those who don't know what evergreen means, it just means that the game will sort of keep selling over time. So if you want to have a long tail on your game, yeah, you really have to work to get your game up there in the top 1% or so, which is very difficult. So don't shoot yourself in the foot by not building a brand.
And I guess like in every industry, you have consolidation too, right? So you see larger players come in and, start taking over things like Kickstarter and, in terms of taking over in terms of a share of voice, right? So, the bigger budgets allow them to command more of the share of voice, and then it makes it tougher for the little guys to get the attention. And unfortunately, that's the evolution of pretty much every industry out there, right? What is your process for, so you've got like, obviously you got games that are constantly on the go. Are you big into doing like tabletop simulator in your playtesting? Are you more of kind of no, I want to have the tactile of being at like an event with people and and getting the reactions live that way? Or what's your process for your playtesting of your concepts?
Right. So at the beginning, I used to go to the NYC playtest all the time. That was the main place I would go get things tested.
Yeah.
In that case, I did cut things out and print them and cut them out. That I make games with a lot of components, and especially like when I'm first starting, and I got tired of cutting out pipe tiles, to be honest. And so, Tabletop Simulator has been amazing. And then the second thing is that in the heavy game space, finding playtesters is tough. They are long games. In their early stages, they definitely suck.
Yeah.
Like they're definitely rough at that stage. And so, you're asking somebody to commit 2 or 3 hours to something that probably isn't enjoyable to them. And to be honest, heavy games are fairly niche anyways. Yeah. And so having your game on Tabletop Simulator and being able to reach out to people around the world to play helps immensely. Like it helps you find that group. And I live in New York City, which is super dense location. So I have access to a ton of people. Yeah. And even still, I need to go online and find players for these heavy games. And I was fortunate enough to meet Tim online, who has been the developer on many of my games. And he actually lives up in Minnesota. So yeah, my biggest like partner as far as working on development through these games has been through online.
No, that's amazing. Is there any thing that you can tease out that's up and coming? Like, what's the next game we can expect from you?
So I have two of them. I have a pretty big one that is a programming style game. Basically you're playing as like an Amazon distribution center, and so you're automating the distribution center, and then you're using the same code to automate the vehicles delivering into like a New York City style grid. And then I have a second game that is a deduction style game. And like the cool thing with this deduction style game is that it's not one in which somebody else can mess up your deductions. Like one problem with a lot of deduction games is like someone says, oops, I missaid that one time, like 4 turns again, and then like it ruins the whole deduction. And this one is not, won't have that sort of issue. So those are the two that are probably going to come out soonest.
No, that's awesome. Well, for people who are interested in Trailblazers, I have a link in the show notes. I'll also post it in the Board Game Binge podcast Facebook group, a private group. Anybody's welcome. Simply just send us an invite. We'll bring you in and, check out this game. Or you can, quite frankly, just on Kickstarter, just type in Trailblazers and you can find it there. Check it out. This game looks awesome. It looks like a lot of fun. It's definitely right in my wheelhouse. I want to wish you all the best in this campaign, and congratulations once again. Eh?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
No worries. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.